I kind of wanted to touch on something, and it's going to be more health related in this video than maybe what I've previously done in terms of. I mean, it's still an AA related video in my opinion because there's a couple of reasons why I'm bringing the topic up, but glasses was flaring. One thing that happened to me, I'm going to say it's been about. This was 2013, I think, when it first started happening to me. It was something that was later diagnosed as alcoholic neuropathy. And there's two reasons why I'm doing this video topic on it. One is when I first was told that that might be what my problem was or my health related issue was, I immediately started searching everywhere I could online about it and started reading everything I could about it. And the information was just so bad and it was so limited. And you read, a large majority of web pages, and they gave you really grim news, more or less saying that, you never were going to get any better, that there was never hope of any chance. And a lot of it was pro-AA bullshit, telling you that you needed to be in treatment as fast as possible. That was one reason why I wanted to talk about it. Another reason has to do with the fact that for a long time, I had a deep-seated sense of guilt about having it, a deep sense of shame, you might say. And it's something I think that needs to be addressed in this video because oftentimes you'll hear people in AA or those meetings, they'll claim it's a shame-based disease or a shame-based illness. And that, to me, is a bunch of bullshit. The reason that there's a lot of shame and stigma surrounding addiction is because pop culture, society, and everything at large enforces the idea that you should be ashamed of what you are. And I'll go into a little more of that later about how it ties into neuropathy. But I remember this was during a heavy drinking period. I was drinking about, I've said it on here before, like about a half gallon or a little over a half gallon of vodka a day. I'd wake up in the morning and I would have to drink in order to function. And I remember I was not living in a very healthy environment anyway, and the building was a bit of a slum anyway. I was in a bit of a slum tenement. So I didn't have adequate heating, and I remember it was in the middle of the winter time, and I remember I woke up one morning and a couple of my toes were really cold. And at the time I thought to myself, well, of course you're not really thinking too clearly when you're drinking a couple of half gallons of vodka a day and staying drunk and drinking just to survive. But I remember thinking to myself, well, there's no heat in here that's worth anything except this little floor heater in here. It's 20 degrees outside, and that's probably what's going on with my foot. And I just, I really kind of shrugged it off at the time. It's really strange now that I've quit drinking, how much of a hypochondriac I've become about a lot of health issues. That would have alarmed me back then. But when you're kind of trapped in that cycle of addiction, there's really, I don't know, it was kind of like nothing to really worry about. I had to worry about killing the shakes and trying to stop a hangover and trying to stop from getting really bad sick in the mornings. That's all I worried about. But I can't say how long it took before I noticed that my entire left foot was getting really cold. And I can't say how long it took before my right foot was getting really cold. It was like, not really, it was like cold spots. And then later on it became like just having feet that were freezing cold all the time. And again, being drunk at the time and being heavily addicted like I was at the time, I just attributed it to the fact that I didn't have adequate insulation and adequate heat, and that I was kicking the covers off. That was the best thing I could think about at the time. I mean, really, as I said, let's face it, when you're drinking the way I was drinking, you're not really thinking about much of anything in terms of without some kind of skewered perception of everything. Really, the main drive when you're that heavily addicted to anything is just feeding the addiction or addicted behavior. And later on, it was some months later, I ended up in the ER. It was one of many trips I've had to the ER. I had really severe withdrawals. I had, they ended up having to sedate me at the time because I was having, frightening hallucinations. And it took 7 security guards to bring me down. That's what they told me later on. I don't know The truth of that, to be honest, I never saw a video. I don't think I would want to see video of that, but which is something that I would never be able to accomplish, as an ordinary man. I don't remember how I got put in the hospital. Not really. I don't remember. I remember being strapped into an ambulance, and I remember being restrained. And I remember the hallucinations, and I remember they had to give me Ativan and Librium and a whole lot of other stuff. It was a pretty horrifying experience. And it's been repeated since that time. I mean, it's not like that was the final blow that made me stop drinking altogether. But I did say something after they'd done all this blood work and they'd done all these x-rays and all this other stuff to me. I can't really remember a lot during the few days that I was in the hospital. I mean, it was pretty hazy. I was pretty out of my mind. They said that I was really, I never got to see any official paperwork or anything like that, but they said I was pretty much almost dying as a result of it. But I asked the doctor about, I've got cold legs and I've got cold feet, and I never got an official stamp, an official diagnosis or anything like that, but he said, well, it's alcoholic neuropathy. And of course, I'd never heard of alcoholic neuropathy, and I didn't know what it was. And I said, does it ever go away? And he said, well, if you quit drinking alcohol, there's a small chance, but it'll probably never get any better. It'll only get worse. That wasn't enough at the time to actually make me quit. I remember I got out of the ER at the time, and I think I made it a few days before I started drinking again. And I remember I got to a point where when I would like touch my legs, it was like touching a dead man's legs. It was like just frigid cold. And yet I was so hopelessly hooked into that addiction at the time. I was so physically dependent on alcohol and everything. I just couldn't quit. Even though I knew that this was, a potentially disabling condition that I was showing classic symptoms of, still couldn't quit. When I did, I kicked the drinking habit shortly thereafter for a long time. I mean, it would have been a long time for me at the time because, like I said, I never got any longevity in staying away from alcohol until I left AA. I never could get good sober time in AA. I never could get, they called it sober time, but I mean, you know what I'm saying. I never could quit for any extended period of time in AA. I didn't get any lengthy periods of abstinence. I didn't get that till after I got out of AA. It's been almost 5 years now since I've had a drink, but I noticed that when I would quit and I would dry out for short periods of time, before I would pick up and drink again, it would go away. The coldness would go away. The feelings would come back into my legs. There were occasionally, cold sensations or something like that, but it was never, to the point of being disabling like some unfortunate people have. And there's many types of neuropathies. I'll get into that in a minute. But every time I would go back out on a bender, I'd wake up in the morning sometime and I felt like I had like 2 concrete blocks for feet. And I never had it affect my walking. I never had it affect my gait. But I would read online about situations and, how severe it could be, and it would scare me. And but it didn't scare me enough. And I remember around the time that I had finally quit drinking for good, again, I was reading all I could find on neuropathy because it flared up really bad. The last bad drunk I went on a long time ago. And it was burning. It was no longer just cold sensations. It was burning sensations that was running up and down my legs. And, I started reading about advanced symptoms and how bad it got. And again, like I said, you read one web page, it would tell you one thing. You read another web page, it would tell you another thing. Needless to say, I didn't get any support from those people in AA at the time, but it was funny. This was when I had quit on my own without the religious cult. This was when I was actually doing it on my own, and I was researching, and I was lucky because I did find a good doctor. But every website I went to, everything I read, it said the damage done, by neuropathy was permanent. And the only thing I could think of at the time is, well, I'm glad it's not any worse than it really is. I'm sure I can learn to live with these burning sensations that bother me or these freezing cold sensations, or sometimes I would get occasional numbness in my hands or anything. But the main thing that kept me from really wanting to talk to anybody about it, including doctors alone, was there was a deep sense of shame about it. The shame was, of course, that I had done this to myself, that I had drank myself into this shape, that I was so hopelessly hooked on my addiction that I couldn't stop, even when it was something that was potentially disabling. I've read of people I knew people in treatment that said they had severe neuropathy and they couldn't walk for long distances without being in a lot of pain. Their sensation, they claimed, happened is when they walked along the floor, they felt like they were walking on jagged rocks. I got lucky. That never happened to me. But the thing that I did find out, at least in my own experience, is that, yeah, it does improve when you leave off the booze. And it's important to remember that, when it comes to nerves, it's not like, you drank so much vodka that all of a sudden your nerves just give up the ghost and just die. And that's what happens to your nerves. What it is usually, what they believe, the medical community believes, is caused by severe malnourishment, a severe lack of vitamins deficiencies. I didn't know until much later that if you take multivitamins, even when you're drinking a lot of alcohol, especially when you're drinking alcohol on the level I was drinking it, the liquor just actually eats it up. It doesn't, it's not like you're getting any kind of nourishment situation from it. And then there's forms of neuropathy that are caused by other things, like, diabetics can get neuropathy. There's a particular doctor I looked at online who's specialized in diabetes for, decades, and he claims that neuropathy can actually improve on its own. I mean, not on its own, but with the proper control of blood sugar, in the case of a diabetic or something like that. But you can see improvement and you can heal. And that was one of the main things I wanted to do when I decided to put the video together, because there's just no information hardly on it out there at all. You read one article and it says the damage permanent, you'll never get better. You read something on Quora or on Reddit, and it's a bunch of horror stories by a bunch of AA people, or you look at one web page and it says, the prognosis, if you try to diagnose yourself over the internet, is always going to be a grim and bleak when it comes to the situation. There just didn't seem to be enough information out there about it. Now, a couple of the things I did in regards to it, well, I mean, I knew I was getting better when I got, at the time I was kind of unemployable, but I got a temporary job that caused me to be able to stand on my feet all day long, and I had to do a lot of walking, and I had to, I was always moving around. It was warehouse work, and I remember actually feeling a sense of gratitude when I could go up a couple of flights of stairs without even worrying about any funny sensations or anything. Do I have any after effects of it today? Occasionally, if I'm tired, if I've been working on my feet all day long, because I'm on them now, I can get kind of almost like a falling asleep type sensation, but it's certainly nothing crippling, and it certainly hasn't got worse, and it's certainly improved quite a lot since I quit drinking. So, but I remember the persistent feeling, like I said, of shame about it. I've actually done this to myself. I've put myself into this position. And of course, you go to AA meetings and they rightfully heap more, righteously, I meant to say, not rightfully. Nothing they do in there is right. But they heap more guilt and more shame on you. And they continually to browbeat you and try to make you feel bad about yourself and make you hate yourself, etc., etc. But it's definite proof to me that not necessarily a correlation between getting frightened over your health and quitting your addiction. I mean, I really wasn't that frightened over my health at the time that I quit, really quit. What actually happened with me when I finally quit drinking, well, for one thing, I wasn't on a bender when I finally gave up alcohol. I wasn't on a full-blown, drink 2 bottles of, drink 2 half gallons of vodka a day and wake up and drink some more just to function. I wasn't in that situation any longer. I was drinking a little bit in the evenings, and then I found that whenever I drank, I would have a buzz that would make me kind of happy. It would enhance things for maybe just a little while. And then for some reason, this sinking depression would come in, and this sinking feeling of anxiety would come in. And I'd wake up in the morning and I would always be kind of nervous, and I'd have kind of a little jitter in my hands, and I'd end up drinking in the mornings. And the neuropathy didn't flare back up on the last drunk. Nothing really major happened, like emergency rooms or anything like that. It was just a situation of, you know something, this just ain't worth it. You know, I just don't feel like, I don't get any pleasure out of this anymore. It doesn't, I mean, the few minutes of buzzing and feeling pretty good, it just didn't seem to add up to anything measurable in terms of the misery that would come with afterwards. You know, I don't like feeling depressive, and I certainly don't like anxiety. I already have a lot of anxiety anyway in my everyday dealings, but having anxiety added or enhanced or anything is what the alcohol seemed to be doing to me. So it was just, you know, it was a good idea for me to quit. But you don't have to feel ashamed if you're having or experiencing health problems as a result of your addiction. Even though, you know, when I had first contacted a certain society online that worked with people who have neuropathy, and I had contacted them, and, you know, they wanted to know about, you know, the prognosis and case history and all that. And when I had told them the truth, you know, it was almost like their tone on the voice went from being helpful to almost like, oh, you know, probably nothing going to be done for you. You know, I would like to address that more, because it's something that stays in the back of your mind anyway, because there is something called idiopathic neuropathy, where they don't really know what causes that. I was reading about people that just, for whatever reason, developed that were active people that are almost disabled, and it really made me really hesitant to want to talk about it, because, you know, I was like, well, here's people that's never abused themselves the way I've abused themselves, and yet they're in a really crippling state, or in a really tragic state of affairs, and they probably wouldn't want to hear me say anything about what I'm going through over here. But I don't think that because there are other people who suffer from these conditions that are not related to alcoholism itself, that a person should have to feel quiet or should have to feel ashamed of themselves. I think this is one reason I think I'm making this video. Like I said, it's an important thing that I need to actually talk about out loud. It's kind of like the time I tried to commit suicide. I've never really gotten to a place where I can actually openly talk about that. That was a really, really bad experience for me all the way around, you know, because I got it from both family and friends, or not friends. I mean, I wouldn't call those people friends now, but I got it from AA people, and I got it from family, and you know, I even got fucking made fun of by some AA people for it, believe it or not. You know, there's no level of low those people would go to, and I think that part of being able to speak out and speak up about something like this, I don't know if there's anything in terms of like it being a big deal or a big step for me, but I do think that it would be necessary for me to put something like this out here in case there is someone who happens to be experiencing alcoholic neuropathy, or, you know, or experiencing something related to alcohol in terms of an alcohol-related illness, and realize that there is information out there that it's not the death sentence that you might think it is, that it's not it's not the end all that you might think it is. I know there's nothing more terrifying, or at least for me, there was nothing more terrifying than realizing, you know, there's a possibility my health is completely failing, that I could become permanently disabled, and it would all be self-inflicted on my part. It put me in a very dark, and it put me in a very lonely place. It put me in I don't know exactly how to describe the feeling. I don't think you can describe that feeling, where it put me. But it was something I carried around with me for a long time. I didn't want to tell people about it. There's no real need to tell people about it. I mean, I don't go around telling people my fucking health problems or whatever anyway, you know, but it was like a point of shame thing for me, and I think it's a holdover from the religious cult of AA and all the bullshit they drill into your head about, you're such a horrible person because you let all this stuff happen to you. And it's a destructive narrative that that I have lived with off and on, not just with neuropathy, not just with the suicide thing, but I think the longer I'm away from AA, the more often I can see just how I can recognize certain little things that pop up in my life today, and I can realize, something, that's all bullshit. I don't have to feel like I'm less of a human being or less of a person because of anything that's really happened to me, or that I'm somehow doomed to die drunk simply because I refuse to follow the script or the narrative that has become so mainstream in our society that no one even wants to dare question it. I do a little bit more than question it. I'm not painting myself up as innocent here. I mean, I full on attack it if I feel like it. But anyway, I'm going to try to make another video this week that'll be more on topic with the usual sort of thing, since this is kind of not like my usual thing. But anyway, in terms of having any health problems or anything like that out there, if you're struggling with that, I mean, you can eventually, if you quit drinking or if you severely moderate your drinking, there is hope. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And one last thing before I go, if you ever search for alcoholic neuropathy, you'll see a lot of phony fucking websites out there that'll promise you, your neuropathy can be cured in 10 days. Your neuropathy can be cured in 9 days. Just send us all your money and we'll send you a special shoe or something and it'll fix all your problems. I think it's really low down to prey on people's tragedy and their fears like that. Anyway, I did get 20 minutes out of this. I hope I helped anybody out there. I'll see you guys later this week, hopefully.